ago, I was sitting in a government office in the Pacific, waiting for a meeting to start, when an official from the Ministry of Finance arrived and I introduced him to the official from the Ministry of Health. And the finance person immediately commented, "Oh, you're from the Ministry of Health. I took my mother to the hospital yesterday and you didn't have the specific medicine she needed." She responded back saying that they didn't have the money to pay to restock for those kinds of medicines right now. He refuted that by saying his own department had released a substantial amount of money from the budget last month. And she responded that the money isn't allocated to reach her directly for her to be able to buy the right medicine needed for their patients. This was turning into an interesting conversation. Then the finance official said, "Well, why don't we allocate and transfer the money directly and specifically to cover the medicines that are actually needed?" And the official from health said, "Yes, why don't we?" Right at that moment, a beautiful relationship was born. And this very relationship, this very understanding shows us how a budget can make a real and tangible difference to real people. And for me, it really reminded me how powerful a budget can be and what a difference it can make when done well and when not. So how else can a government use their national budget to make sure that public finances are being used to deliver the right services to the right places to help the right people? One way is through gender-responsive budgeting. Now, more than ever, limited public finances need to be allocated efficiently. So many more people are struggling as a result of COVID-19. Let's just consider how huge this problem really is. For the first time in 20 years, the number of people in poverty is going to increase, and not just by a little bit. The World Bank estimates that the pandemic-induced global new poor will be between 119 and 124 million people in 2020. In 2021, it estimates this number will become between 143 and 163 million people. We can see that the trend has turned sharply since 2019. So many people need so much support. In 2021, 750 million people may be living on less than $1.90 a day. That's around 10% of the world's population. So how does gender-responsive budgeting fit in? First, what is this gender-responsive budgeting? Well, what it is not is just a separate budget for women. And it's not targeting only programs that are specifically for women. And it's not about seeking to spend exactly the same amount on men as on women. It is about analysing a budget and government policies to understand the different impact they will have on women and men, on boys and girls, and other different sectors of the community. Gender-responsive budgeting isn't something to be put off until all your other reforms are done. Gender-responsive budgeting isn't something that you can only start working on once you have the perfect budget process in place. Gender-responsive budgeting can have immediate impacts on the lives of real people. Start small. Start with a pilot. Start with one program. Just start. But how does gender-responsive budgeting impact real people? Well, let me introduce you to Lily. Lily lives in Fiji. Now, when we say Fiji, you probably immediately think of an idyllic island setting with bright sunshine and palm trees. And it is. It's also a country that has almost 36% of the population living on less than $5.50 a day. Think about that. 1 in 3 people living on less than $5.50 a day. So, how has gender-responsive budgeting made a difference to Lily? Fiji really embraced gender-responsive budgeting in 2019. It became one of the first 7 countries in the world to complete a gender-responsive budgeting assessment report, and by running pilots during the 2019-2020 budget process. The report found that ministries will need, firstly, training and support to include gender considerations. Secondly, that Parliament has a part to play by applying scrutiny. Thirdly, that not just planning is important, but all monitoring has to include gender considerations. And lastly, that the Auditor General must audit compliance with new gender-responsive budgeting processes. This process encompasses everything from initial conception to final reviewing. Now back to Lily. She lives in an area where a new way of oyster farming was being encouraged by the Ministry of Fisheries through providing training and helping to build viable and sustainable businesses. Sounds great, doesn't it? However, Gender-responsive budgeting analysis discovered that the program disproportionately benefited men by running a week-long remote training that women with childcare and other responsibilities couldn't attend. For Lily, a single mother, it wasn't an option. Thanks to the gender-responsive budgeting analysis, the program's been redesigned to be more inclusive, and Lily and many other women like her will be able to participate and better support her family and community. Gender-responsive budgeting analysis can be used proactively as part of planning projects and can uncover opportunities for improvement. For example, new investment for a sports facility could be improved by planning for reliable and strong street lighting around the area that make it safe and accessible for Lily, her children, and the whole community to access. Fiji has introduced a levy on the use of plastic bags. Of course, we all know the environmental benefits of a tax like this, but this is another way a budget can have a strong gender impact. As shoppers move toward the use of reusable and sustainable shopping bags, women in the community have been able to make and sell bags for this purpose, often out of recycled materials. Lily's community and family have a new opportunity to create their own revenue. Gender-responsive budgeting. As you've seen for Lily and her family, it makes a real difference. Does it take some effort? Yes. Does the government need to build capacity and make changes to processes and the way it supports ministries to think through their budget submissions? Yes, it does. Quite a bit of effort. Is it worth it? Ask Lily.